The Horus heresy did not start at the walls of the palace. It did not begin with the invasion of the Sol system, nor the siege of Betrayal. Many privy to such records and information claimed that it began on Istvan V, when the Raven Guard, Iron Hands, and Salamander's legions were shattered on their brothers' treacheries. Others yet lay claim that it was Istvan III, when Horus purged his legions of loyal forces ere he had raised his banners of perfidy. Some, too, whisper that it began in a temple on Davin. Yet are these not the harvests of the damned? Does a bounty not need to be seeded before it can grow? The truth is that the road to Horus's betrayal began long before. A path of 1,000 steps, built and paved by his decisions. Long before he swore deference to dark deities, he was a man, a leader, and a warmaster. Yet even then, there were signs for those with sense to see it. A furrow dug awaiting the planting. While we cannot pinpoint the genesis of all that made the warmaster turn from the Emperor's light, we can certainly see the truth of matters. Today, we speak of a tragedy of the Great Crusade, a Pyrrhic victory that near decimated a legion long before the Horus heresy ever began. A cold, calculated scenario of nepoticide overseen by a cruel and malignant warmaster, and the one person who could see Horus Lupercal for the monster he would always become.
Welcome one and all to the channel. My name is Azazel, and I am the one to whom you have the misfortune of listening to today. An enormous thank you to Baldermort for lending me his growling cadences and dramatic baritone in that gorgeous introduction. I've long been a fan of Baldermort, and having the opportunity to do a collaboration with him is, quite frankly, unbelievable. So do join me in thanking him for that. Today, it's the Battle of Gate 42, one of the Great Crusade's myriad battles that occurred during humanity's bloody reclamation of the lost colonies and conquering of alien worlds across the galaxy. Information is scarce, I'll admit, but I'll try to dress up what I can with artistic license. Quick addresses first. Like, comment and subscribe if you so please. It takes a second, but even a like helps out the channel a lot. 2. There is no AI used on this channel. This is an abominable intelligence-free zone. And 3. If you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to help me out and just let me know. Just don't be an ass about it. Now, steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. A place where hope goes to die, and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 31st millennium. There are horrors in our galaxy. Some born of the otherworld, the warp and its dark denizens. Others are more material in nature. They are myriad alien races. Dark, twisted abominations hailing from darker epochs. Discarded weapons of war from interstellar conflicts. Insidious life forms that feed and corrupt and spread their tendrils far and wide. It was within the Akam Sthos cluster that one such Xenos race reared its foul and wretched head. The Akam Sthos cluster had been brought into compliance rapidly during the earliest stages of the Great Crusade, and had, by all accounts, flourished into a rapidly developing culture across its worlds. A picture-perfect example of the Imperium's enlightenment and prosperity across the stars. Humanity uplifted to a more perfect state of existence. Which makes it all the worse that a Xenos infestation brought the entire cluster crashing down. a ghoulish parasite of unconfirmed genesis forced its way through the populace of the cluster. Whether it raced through like a wildfire ahead of any attempts at eradication, or whether it selected a more subversive and subtle method that allowed it to seize control is unknown. All that is known is that the entire cluster fell to these disgusting creatures. The parasite, as far as Imperial records tell, matured within the eye sockets of its victims. There, perfectly positioned to eventually seize total control over the host body, presumably via the ocular orbit. It is not specified, although it is highly likely that as part of the gestation process, this parasite in its larval stage consumed the eyes of its victims. This supposition comes from the name the Unsighted Kings, which were the leaders of this parasitic plague. For the truly diabolical part of this infestation was that these alien parasites were part of a psychic cabal that allowed each and every host to play a part in their own subjugation. Billions of souls trapped under the control of psychic parasites, all under the sway of these unsighted kings. And with each new human fallen victim to these alien parasites, the cabal, their gestalt consciousness, and their influence grew. To lose a planet to sedition, sabotage, invasion, or corruption was unthinkable. This was the time of the Great Crusade. Its guiding lights were perfect, nigh immortal beings. Its armies were transhuman colossi. The Imperium's imperial truth demanded that the galaxy would bend the knee and accept that the Milky Way belonged to humanity and humanity alone. The light of terror would not be overshadowed by any Xenos malignance or human ignorance. Yet this was not a planet lost. This was an entire cluster. Billions upon billions of host bodies overrun with a disgusting and cruel parasite. The lives of humans used as incubators to kickstart a Xenos empire. And still, this was not the worst insult to the Imperium, and to the freshly appointed warmaster Horus Lupercal. For the Akam Sthos cluster had been brought into compliance by the Warmaster's own legion long before. The Lunar Wolves had brought unto the populace compliance, illumination, and the embrace of the Imperium. For these planets to fall, even unwillingly, was an insult to the Legion and a spit in the face to Warmaster Horus. After all, how strong could a Warmaster be if he could not consolidate his victories? Weakness had no place in a legionary, let alone a Primarch, let alone him. Even as he digested the news, his fears whispered in the back of his mind. Not that he would ever acknowledge them as fears, merely concerns. Regardless, this cluster must fall. This Xenos infestation would have to be burnt out, not in a protracted campaign, not with carefully calculated precision, but with overwhelming force. For each day that the Akam Sthos cluster survived was another mark of weakness against the Warmaster, another moment of insecurity, and thus did he call his brothers and their legions. An armada formed, the likes of which had not been seen since the Warmaster's ascension. The gathering of Horus and his wolves, Corvus and his ravens, Perturabo and his warriors, and Leman and his Vulca Fenrica. Enough strength to achieve victory 10 times over if they fought wisely. It was then that Horus made a mistake. A tactical error, surely. A miscalculation that any individual barely schooled in the arts of warfare could see. Yet Horus was many things. A brilliant commander, perhaps first and foremost beyond his other strengths. There was no mistake, no faux pas, no ill-considered strategy. There was only his will, his desire, and his orders. The reasons for which I will elucidate upon more once we have finished this small tale. For in his battle briefing he outlined his plan, which was little different to any other battle plan he ever made if we are being honest. A lightning strike to the heart of the infestation, a single all-out attack to cut the head from the snake and remove the leadership of this cluster-wide pandemic. Typical Lunar Wolves strategy. And in many ways this was the perfect strategy. The spearhead of the Lunar Wolves, coupled with the siege experience of the Iron Warriors, the unrestrained fury of the Volkafendica, and the misdirection and harrying of the Raven Guard would form an attack force with astounding efficacy. Yet this was not what Horus demanded. The Raven Guard would perform a blunt force frontal attack on Gate 42 in order to secure access to the fortress of the Xenos Cabal. A frontal assault, one with little regard for tactics or cunning. A method of war where maneuverability and agility would matter for little amongst the killing grounds before the fortress walls. All of the Raven Guard's gifts of speed, deception, and harrying strikes would be lost. Lost amidst the grueling drudgery of a forward charge of ceramite, reduced to becoming a wall of fodder before the guns. Corvus instead suggested a faint, focused approach, distracting and thinning out the defenders' lines, causing disruption and mayhem, breaking open the cracks in the defenders' armor. This method of guerrilla warfare, deceptive yet effective, would ensure that not only would his warriors perform at their best, but provide enormous tactical advantages for the other legion's assault. To enlist the Raven Guard in such a crass, uncultured way of war would merely squander the lives of Astartes, and was not a sign of the tactical genius that should so befit the warmaster of the Imperium. Perturabo, as socially aware and as fraternally warm as he would always be, let loose a snort of derision at Corvus. He claimed that Corvus and his warriors were merely afraid of battle, that their tactics and strategies a cowardly method of avoiding the enemy, as if marching blithely into oncoming fire was some sort of brave and advanced tactic, and not the uncaring, uncompromising orders of an unimaginative, uninspiring, and uncharismatic blockhead of a Primarch. Corvus would have seen Perturabo answer for his accusations, a brawl that, had fate shined upon us all, would have ended with Perturabo spitting out an apology from between broken teeth. Yet Leman Russ stepped in. He alone managed to hold back the Primarch of the Raven Guard, to speak to him as only one who knows how to wield fury as a weapon could. It was Leman who convinced Corvus of the need to bend before Horus's orders. He was the first found, the oldest, the Emperor's favoured son, was he not? Loyalty to their father bound them to the Warmaster and his orders, despite being beyond comprehension. What could Corvus do? He was late found. Compared to his brothers, he was relatively newly elevated to the Primarch of his legion, a legion that had for so long before acted as auxiliary forces to other legions, other Primarchs. In fact, a large portion of his commanding officers were Terran-born sons, those whose ways of war were more akin to those of Kurz than Corax, whose savagery as jailers and terror tactics had been widely favoured by none other than Horus Lupercal himself. Close were the ties between the old Raven Guard and the Lunar Wolves. Corvus had no other option but to lead his sons into a wall of death. Yet he would install vast swathes of his vanguard with those Terran-born Raven Guard. Let them atone for their reprehensible crimes of war before the killing guns of Gate 42. And should they fall, then let it be under the orders of the Primarch, who had encouraged them to satiate their darkest desires for decades before Corvus had come to the Legion. Let them perish in the fires of war as Horus Lupercal so ordered them to. And perish they did. Walls of weaponry burst to life as the Raven Guard launched their frontal assault. The air shimmered with the heat of 1,000,000 weapon discharges and left the Raven Guard with nowhere to go but forwards. They died in droves. Many fell before ever reaching the gate. Corvus, despite having assigned those sons he despised to the front lines, still fought his best to save them. To watch Corvus that day would have been a dark echo of Sanguinius at the Siege of Terra. A father caught in a non-stop battle to save his sons and carry the day. They did carry the day, however. Gate 42 fell before the might of the Raven Guard and allowed the Lunar Wolves to carry out their lightning strike and execute the unsighted kings. The Imperium, from that moment until its end, would forever view this battle as a victory for the Lunar Wolves and the freshly appointed Warmaster, not knowing that the Raven Guard had paid a terrible price in blood for it. A single battle had seen the Raven Guard now depleted. At a mere 80,000 Astartes, they were the smallest of all the legions. The viscera of thousands of Corvus's sons littered the ground, dripping from broken ceramite armor and staining the dust where it fell. Corvus, despite having had little love for his Terran-born sons, they had still been his sons, sacrificed on the pyre of Horus's arrogance. A warmaster that had disregarded other, better plans in favor of a plan that relied solely on the decimation of another legion. Nevermore. Nevermore would the Raven Guard serve alongside the Lunar Wolves. Corvus disavowed himself from his brother's command and struck the Warmaster across the face in an act of defiance. The Ravens would keep to themselves, and never again fight side by side with the sons of Horus Lupercal. What follows now traces the boundaries between lore and supposition. The tiny headcanons that we make between what is left unsaid, between the characters and stories we all know and love so well. So do take what is said from here with a pinch of salt. When the Horus heresy began, it was unbelievable. A word oft overused, and yet none so more fitting. To even consider that a Primarch, and Horus of all Primarchs, had turned traitor was nothing short of impossible. It was not merely hard to believe, it was unbelievable. Like a facet of reality had been tipped on its head. Gravity no longer worked. The strong nuclear force had been broken. Suns had turned to black holes, and black holes turned to suns. Horus had turned traitor. Rogel Dawn, a man whose temperament was ever icy cold as the fields of his adopted planet of Inwit, nearly killed Nathaniel Garro in a fiery rage when Garro dared to tell him of the events at Istvan. Corvus took merely a moment. What seemed an impossibility for the entire galaxy was not so for the Primarch of the Raven Guard. He had seen his brother's handiwork, had been the victim of his callousness and cruelty. Corvus had seen the man within, the true face of Horus Lupercal. The few moments he took were at shock that it had happened, not that it could happen. For all of Corvus's insight at the Warmaster's true personality, hearing that someone took such drastic actions is shock enough. All in all, Corvus was ready, for he had known who Horus was. This was merely another step along his eldest brother's path of self-righteous, arrogant damnation. But why did Horus betray Corvus at the Battle of Gate 42? Part of Horus's actions could be contributed to his vainglorious nature. To use his brother's legions to bear the brunt of the damage, and to grasp the glory at the last moment. It makes sense, yet I believe that it was something more. So, let me digress a little and have a ramble, and if you think I'm wrong, please let me know. Much is to be said of Corvus's primary ability, that of blending into the darkness, of allowing his enemy's gaze to pass over him, that he can cloak himself in the blackness that he absorbed after years within the mines of deliverance. A glamour, in fantasy parlance, that of being able to cloak what is true beneath that which is false. This, and vice versa. The ability to discern what is true beneath what is false. When the Emperor visited Corvus for the first time, Corvus could see the truth behind the mask. The man behind the monarch. Corvus's ability was not that of a pariah, not the ability to banish those projections of warp energy that emanate from psykers, but something sharper and more specific. The ability to pierce a glamour that fooled the galaxy and 19 other suns. The Emperor, for the first time in an age, had a son that he no longer needed to perform for. A son with whom he could converse not as a glorious warlord grooming heirs and generals, but as a reluctant savior with blood on his hands. A personality with which Corvus could sympathize. Corvus understood that the Emperor's actions were tyrannical in many ways. Corvus was not blind to the actions of his father. The potential hypocrisy in a freedom fighter serving an imperial overlord. Yet Corvus understood the rationale behind the actions. The duty of care, the burden of power. A tired ancient father finally meeting a child that could understand him. And later on, we do see that Corvus was favoured, albeit not until the Horus Heresy. Yet he was trusted in ways beyond all of his brothers. The Emperor, despite struggling with the war in the Webway, deigns to speak with his son, and discloses certain secrets of the Primarch project. The chance to rebuild the Legion in a matter of months rather than decades. Out of desperation or trust. I'll let you decide, cause I could so easily be wrong. Yet it is for these reasons, and with these justifications, that Horus was jealous. Like a spoilt elder child, he wished to see his younger brother suffer. He wished agony and a fall from grace upon his younger sibling because he did not wish to share his father. He had to be in the spotlight, the favoured, the enamoured. The ugly face beneath a veneer of vanity was revealed. Perhaps some of you will cry out that this was merely the groundwork for the great heresy yet to come, a decimation of Corvus's forces before getting underway. And yet, not only does this not fit chronologically, unless a retcon pops up somewhere, but also, had Horus wished to focus his attentions on victory during the heresy, he already had strong roots within the Raven Guard. Many officers that had not yet been banished by Corvus, that still remembered the close ties of serving with the Lunar Wolves, proliferated the ranks of the Raven Guard. Had Horus wished it, he could have simply left them in place. His actions, his deliberate cruelty and slaughter of his brother's sons, was a vindictive and calculating move. A method to demonstrate who was in charge, who would brook no argument as to their standings within the fraternity of Primarchs. A breaking of Corvus, so that he might know his place amongst the pantheon of the Primarchs. But I could be wrong. Of course, please feel free to disagree with me. Lambast me with rage at my foolish thoughts. Perhaps I merely project the actions of Horus yet to come upon Horus who came before. Yet I doubt it. Horus's character has ever been that of not merely a star ascendant, not merely a powerful warlord, but a manipulative and petty brother. One who knows how much of his true face to show to get what he wants. And a warning to the one soul in the galaxy who could see Horus for who he would truly become. If you're still listening this far, thank you very much for kicking about until now. Do please drop a like, comment and a subscribe. You have no idea how much 5 seconds of your time makes a difference to my channel. And one final thank you to everybody's favourite lore tuber, the one, the only, Baldermort. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed some escapism from reality. For that's why we are all here, isn't it? Until next time.